And I want to introduce a very humble man and my new friend, Alan Heim.
Okay. Hi. Thank you. Okay, I can't see anybody, but I know you're out there. This is something I found in one of my file drawers. And have I, okay. It's a sound effects machine that was used in movie houses before they had sound on film. And I've never seen one, I've never worked with one. I mean, I am not that old. But it is a pretty remarkable device. I wish I had one in my living room. And you guys are very lucky that you don't have to work with anything like that. Imagine dragging that around. So I did start, that's a close-up of it, isn't it? I did start as a sound effects editor in New York City, and I did that for many years. And I worked on some interesting movies. For Sidney Lumet, I worked on The Pawnbroker and The Group and a film called Bye Bye Braverman. And Sidney didn't really like his editor, and he asked me if I would become his next editor, and I jumped at the chance because it just seemed more challenging and more exciting to me. So I started working for Sidney Lumet, and then very luckily fell in with Bob Fosse, who was doing a television movie called Liza with a Z, and I don't know where the feedback is. Somebody has seen Liza with a Z? That's very cool. Yeah. Bob hired me basically because I had some background as a music editor and a sound effects editor. And after that, he sent me a script for Lenny, and I just sort of jumped in with 2 feet. And we started I discovered really how to edit movies working with Fosse. He was a tremendously brilliant man, an open man. And I think the first thing I'd like to do is show you a clip from All That Jazz that involves the use of sound, and then we can talk about that a little bit. So.
And these 2 columns revolve from New York to L.A. And over here on the other side, the same thing. Oh, yeah, there's 2 staircases that come down here and 2 more that come back into the orchestra. And, oh, yeah, and this centerpiece moves out for the interior scenes. And up there, that's Stan. But you'll get familiar with it when we start. Okay, now, all I want to do now is to read easily through the script, and frankly, I'm not too familiar with it myself. So if we go through it, then you'll give Paul and me some rough idea of what we've got. Okay, no acting, everyone. Just take it easy. Easy. All right, lights up. Audrey, you have your first number, and then you begin reading on page 2.
You see, Sammy, in California, everybody needs a car. I got a friend who bought a Mercedes just to get to the bathroom. I guess only in America can a 24-year-old girl like me own a house like this in Beverly Hills.
Thank you all very much. You've done a wonderful job.
Take an hour and a half for lunch, back at 3 o'clock. Don't forget to sign the Boston hotel list. 48.
Excuse me. Is anything wrong? No, nothing.
There's no use to panic till we find out what it really is.
Would you stop that?
Dr. Ballinger is looking at him now. Ballinger is the best there is, Audrey.
Dr. Hyman, we just left it. About half an hour ago. He seemed fine. Just fine.
Well, he called. He said he had chest pains. His left arm was numb. I'm a little bewildered myself. I checked him about a month ago.
All right, who's in charge of this all-important million-dollar show that Mr. Gideon keeps talking about?
I guess I am.
Mr. Gideon is having severe attacks of angina that could possibly lead to a massive coronary.
Oh, shit. I gotta get back to rehearsals. I'm fine. What do doctors know?
About angina, just a little more than show people, Mr. Gideon. Now, if you want to leave, that's fine, but I think you'll die if you do. Can I see you for a moment? Dr. Hyman?
The pain is gone. I'm okay. Nothing wrong with me. A rewrite of the show wouldn't cure. A couple of good jokes is what I need.
You can't leave now.
You just can't go back to rehearsal.
Yes, I can.
Damn it, Joe! Didn't you hear what the doctor just said?
Please, stay.
Joey, I've been talking to Dr. Ballinger.
Jonesy, wait a minute. Let me talk to the star here. If I stay, how much time are we talking about?
At least 2 or 3 weeks.
You've got to be kidding. I got a show to put on. Jonesy, for Christ's sakes, will you talk to these people? They don't understand anything.
Oh, jeez. What's wrong?
Miss Collins? All right.
Damn it.
Easy.
You guys are doing this to me. I wasn't sick until I got here.
What's wrong with him?
It's exhaustion.
You're lying to me.
Yes.
The selective use of sound there kind of focuses the mind. We discussed, I had done another film that involved somebody having a nervous attack, a serious nervous attack, and did some research, and there's a lot of other sounds that people hear. And we decided, like a kind of a hollow, watery sound, a lot of things that interfere with hearing. We decided to go with these just singular, sharp noises. And it pulls you forward, I think, into the next scene. We also discovered, when we were doing Lenny, we discovered that by sort of messing around with time more than the script did, we were able to create a whole new balance for the audience. We wanted to keep the audience off balance. We just wanted them to never quite know what was going to happen. Ralph Burns, who was our composer on all of the films I did with Fosse, and he did a lot of his stage work too, Ralph said there's real time, there's flashbacks, there's flash forwards, and then there's Fosse time. And I spent an enormous amount of work, 4 movies, 3 movies and a television show, working with Fosse in Fosse time, just trying to figure out where the story was. So, I'd like to, when you're a sound editor, as I say, I sort of was happy doing it. It seemed easy, paid fairly well. I worked on a regular basis. But I also wanted to expand my horizons a little bit. And I was doing a film as a sound effects editor, The Group, Sidney Lumet's movie. And an editor came over to me, an editor named Armavakian. And he came over to me and he looked over my shoulder and he said, "Look at that cut. Isn't that a beautiful cut?" The film was cut by Ralph Rosenblum, a somewhat legendary New York editor. So I said, well, what do you mean by beautiful cut? It was just two people having dinner, and it was going from one to the other. And he said, take a look at it. I mean, just study it for a while. And I did. And I realized what he was talking about, which is as one person put the fork up to his mouth, and you went to the other person, and you sort of followed that motion around the screen. And suddenly, everything about editing became very clear to me. So when you're working on a film as a sound effects editor, you also have to look at the way the film is put together, the structure of the film, the structure of the scene, and see where that furthers the story and where it's just really nice to look at. Many of the films I did with Fosse had no dissolves, no fade-outs, no fade-ins, except at the beginning and the end of the picture, because they didn't call for it. But the third film we did together, Star 80, we did use very, very long dissolves because they were quite gorgeous to look at. And so that's how that worked out. This, when I was editing, I play the editor in All That Jazz, and I'm not an actor, God knows. But when I cut my first scene in the movie, there was a lot of tension between Bob and myself, because basically I was editing his life, but he denied that it was his life. The character, Joe Gideon, or Roy Scheider, I kept referring to him as you, and Bob said, no, it's not me, it's Roy or it's Joe. Now, it's Bob's address on the pill bottles. Half the people in the movie are real people, not actors who I knew and who Fosse worked with. So one day, when we got to my first scene in the movie, which is no longer in the movie, thank God. And when you're an editor, you have the option of fighting to get your own stuff out. And I did a lot of that. But there was a scene where I was sitting, and Roy at the chem, and Roy Scheider was sitting next to me, and he was coughing, as Fosse always did, and as Roy did so well in the movie. And I was supposed to raise an eyebrow, a very light little look at him, a kind of a disapproving look. And so I did, and Bob kept the camera running, and he said, do it again, do it smaller, which is one of the great directions that most directors give to their actors. Stop acting. And so I did it 5 times in a row on one slate, and when I cut the scene, I used my first take, which seemed to me to be the smallest, and I hated it. It was much too big. And when Bob saw the cut scene, he said, let's look at the outtake on that. And I said, you're not going to like it. And I ran it for him, and he said, how could I let you do that? And he just got up and he walked across the room and he kicked a garbage can, which was very much unlike him, a little wastebasket. And he said, I don't understand how I could let you do that. I said, Bob, I'm not an actor. And he said, but you're a human being. I should be able to get a better performance out of a human being. And I said, you know, that's the nicest thing you've said to me in 2 weeks. At which point he broke up laughing. And I had, the day before, it had gotten very tense between us, and he said to me, I had a newborn at that time, and he said to me, you know, you were a better editor before you had a kid, which I found was a little bit over the line. And when I went home that night, I had said to my wife, I got to break this rhythm. So, you know, as an editor, you're often in between, you're between the director and his vision and what he really shot. So this line of nicest thing you ever said to me broke the tension. And after that, we never had another cross word between us. Yeah, we discussed things and we argued about things, but there was never any of that meanness. And after Bob died, there was there's a memorial party. Bob was very good at giving parties, even post-mortem. And it's a big party at the Tavern on the Green, and a good friend of Bob's came over to me, and he said, you know, Bob always spoke of you as a guy who edited his life. So I was incredibly moved. And turns out I've worked on a lot of movies that have to do with real people. And a couple of the things I have on the agenda now might also be dealing with real people. It's kind of exciting. People always try and correct you. They say that's not how it was. Well, we deal with film reality. We don't really deal with life reality, as it were. We try and just tell a good story. And speaking of good stories, I know a lot of you are interested in Bless Me Ultima. So I don't know whether to tell the story first or show the clip first. I came onto the film as to re-edit the film. I guess I'll tell the story. I came onto the film to re-edit it. I had met with the director several months before, six months before perhaps, I got this call. We had a lovely meeting, and I never heard from him again, which is part of the nature of doing movies. So I forgot about the movie completely. Somebody else was obviously doing it, and they were shooting it here in New Mexico. But I had read the script, and I got a call from a post-production supervisor friend of mine who asked me if I would come on and take a look at this movie because it was, as he put it, in terrible shape. And it was a director's cut they were looking at. And that was Friday. We arranged for me to screen it on Monday afternoon. Monday morning, I got a call from a guy named Mark Johnson, who is a producer I've worked with before, produced Breaking Bad. He's produced a lot of movies, Rain Man, a lot of stuff, The Notebook. So he called me and he said, you're the only guy who could save this movie. And I said, oh, come on. He said, really, I mean, you've got to do this movie. And money is no object, which is the first thing. When people tell you money is no object, money is always an object, particularly when producers say it. So, nonetheless, they sent me a DVD of it, and I suddenly realized that this was Bless Me Ultima, the film that I had been rejected for several months before that. So I told this to the post-production supervisor, and I said, maybe you should tell the director that he didn't hire me before, because I'm sure he forgot, and he must have had a reason. Well, either they were desperate, or I guess they were desperate. They hired me. I met with the director, and then I kicked him out of the cutting room. And now I think for 3 weeks, then I look at the movie, and we were ready to, I was finished with it, except I had not sat down with him and polished it up to his specifications. Anyway, I'd like to show a clip from that, and then talk about it a little bit. It's just really the beginning of the movie. And that was the part, when I looked at the film, I said to the producer, when we were speaking about it, I said, I'm not really sure I can fix this movie.
Why is there evil in the world? Let me start from the beginning, when I was innocent of the ways of God and men. It was the summer when I was 7. The summer Ultima came to us.
Deborah, Teresa. They here?
Is Ultima really a witch?
No, you will call her La Grande.
I'm afraid.
Mind your manners. We are honored that she comes to live with us. Buenos días, te de Dios grande.
Ay, María Luna. Buenos días te de Dios a ti y a tu familia.
Buenos días, grande. Buenos días.
What beautiful daughters you have raised.
Toño.
Antonio.
Antonio.
Buenos días de Dios, Ultima.
Antonio Grande.
Let it be. This was the last child I pulled from your womb. I knew there would be something between us. I've come to spend the last days of my life here, Antonio.
You will never die. I'll take care of you.
Pase grande. Pase. Nuestra casa es su casa. It's too hot to be standing out here and chatting all day.
When I looked at the movie, the entire opening of the film, apart from the fact that there was no opening, there were no shots of the water, the river, no shots of the locale at all. They existed somewhere, but they were not attached to the movie at that point. The director had done his own voiceover, and he does not sound at all Chicano or Latino. It took you out of the movie immediately. And also, all of the interaction between the boy and the curadera, the witch, as it were, the good witch, was done in long shot. So there was no human connection to be made. And when I came and looked at the dailies, when I started on the film, I discovered that they had this material, which is absolutely fine. Now, there's some shameless stuff in there, like the son superimposing over the boy and his the midwife. But I was trying to reach for humanity in the film. I don't know how many of you actually saw it when it was released, but there were a lot of other scenes with kids from school, and they were not actors, and they were absolutely terrible. So I just went through, I winnowed the scenes down to the bare minimum, staying with our hero, the young boy, who has a lovely face, and he actually pulled the film together. But I got rid of everybody else. Anyway, by the time I finished my cut of it, well, we were ready, and we all poured into a little screening room in Los Angeles, including the producer, Christy Walton of the Walmart family. Christy Walton was the producer of the movie. She's of the Walmart family. She used to read this novel to her son and bought the rights to it, and eventually met someone at a party, mentioned she wanted to make a film of this book but had no idea how to go about it. And the woman, who had never made a film in her life, said, I can put it together for you. We can make a package, and we can get it produced. So she then did one of the smart things they did on the movie, which was hire Mark Johnson, who knows how to produce a movie. But anyway, so we had this screening, and I was quite nervous because I just didn't know what the director's response would be. And he was sitting there with his wife, who was a co-producer, and the lights came up in the room. Just before the lights came up, the producer reached out his hand, Mark Johnson, reached out his hand, and he grabbed my hand, and he said, you really saved my ass here. That felt good. But then the lights came up, and I turned to, we all turned to Carl Franklin, the director, And Carl looked right at me and he said, I liked it better before. And I figure, well, I'm gone because I'm not going to be able to go back to the way it was. It was horrible. So we decided on the following, that was a Friday, on the following Monday he'd come in and we'd start working together. And again, when you're an editor, you have to work with people and you have to make them understand that perhaps their original concept wasn't the best one. Well, he bought the opening completely, but he did not, and well, he bought the opening and then I had put all the water shots and the shot of the saint we found on the internet and colored it a little bit. It was a still shot, but you can't tell in the montage. And then we started really working on the rest of the movie, and he wanted to put back all the kids. And I just decided I could not do that, but I had to find a politic way to make him understand that these kids were terrible. So I said, you know, these kids are really terrible. Okay. And he said, well, I disagree with you, and I've directed Meryl Streep, and he mentioned a lot of one-person names, one-person actor. Denzel, I've directed Denzel. I said, yeah, but these kids are bad actors. They're good actors. And he's a fine director. I don't know what came over him, but I know we had to, and I had to sort of just sit down and grind it out on certain areas. But after another couple of weeks, we basically got the movie done. And it's pretty much done the way it looks now. Music was put on. I think the score is lovely. I had to leave. I had another commitment, so I didn't have to struggle through the voiceover because we had Christy Walton writing a new voiceover. And I said to the director about the voiceover, why did you use your own voice in the mix? And he said, well, they didn't give me any budget to hire somebody. And I'm thinking, you could walk out your door and hire a Chicano or a Latino guy in Los Angeles who could do a better job than this director did. And he seemed to be totally intimidated by everything that happened on the movie. So the movie got released. Eventually, it took a long time to get it released. And I'm pretty sure it's being sold at Walmart even today because Christy Walton does have an inn over there. Anyway, are there any questions about anything I've said so far, anything you've heard? Because if there are, I'd love to answer some.
I'm a Foley artist, and the thing I'm the most fascinated with is obviously, you know, the work you have to do to integrate that into your sound, but obviously all that jazz, one of the greats in terms of what the Foley artists were doing to match those dancers. But one of my questions is, did you have a separate team Foley for the regular people walking around, and then did you bring in dancers for the dance footage, or did you have some brilliant Foley artists that could do both?
Oh, no. We had the dancers come in, and we laid down sort of a tap dance floor, a ballroom floor in the Foley studio.
So
and
they were enacting the movements of the dance.
Pardon?
They were enacting the movements of the dance?
They were dancing the dance.
Wow.
Sure,
wow.
Sure. It was mostly women that we used. Actually, it was kind of interesting because I had a really bad stiff neck for several days. And the dancers said, oh, we can help you out. And they would massage my neck with Tiger Balm. And it was absolutely lovely having these great dancers massaging my neck. It didn't work. So they sent me to a dance masseur who almost killed me but cured my neck. Yeah, actually,
it seems like the process of all that jazz, the sound process of all that jazz was really complex. Like what you were talking about when you were pulling out the sort of reality, when he goes into those, you know, distant moments.
Right.
and that decision you made to kind of almost like stylize it a little bit, like pull it, pop it more.
Yeah.
It seems like the discussions behind that must have been fascinating, like what you decided to do to create all those realities.
Well, yeah, I mean, the intention was that we would, I mean, in the script, the intention was to put it into some other form of reality, as you put it. The question was how to do it, and we spent a lot of time doing it. Bob called in a comedian to have the dancers, have the actors laugh, to tell jokes to the actors, and it was terrible. So I said, Bob, these are actors. Why don't you just tell them to laugh? And that's what you've got here. But the stuff with the comedian was absolutely terrible. Mostly bad jokes. I'll digress a moment. Well, when I was a sound effects editor, I took over the original producers. And there were a couple of scenes to be cut. And the other editor, the original editor, the editor of credit, Ralph Rosenblum, he left, he had another commitment, and he hated Mel Brooks. There was a lot of tension. So when we finished the mix, we mixed a feature film in 5 days. And then the producer called me and he said, well, I don't have a separate music and effects track here. And most of the sound was production sound. So there were no footsteps. And we didn't have time to do it. And he said, so I said, well, hire a sound effects editor and, do the music and effects. He said, I don't have it in the budget. So I said, I can do that. And I did all of the sound effects myself. I knew the film quite well. And I just set myself up with what props I thought I'd need. I did it on 2 passes, and it spent me another 3 days to cut it. But I made a total M&E track, every footstep, every movement in the film. And I did that by myself. I mean, being a Foley artist is a very specialized field, as you know. So sound is an important part of movies, and a lot of people don't understand that. You talk to sound effects editors in New York. I've been working with the same crew for a long, long time, maybe 15 years, on and off, and they're crushed by schedules. They are crushed by budgets, and it's kind of terrible. And more and more companies are closing down, and more more films are just presenting a budget and saying, this is what you have to do it with. And it's often not enough. Somehow it gets done. But I almost wish people would just say, we can't do it for that. We don't have enough time. We don't have enough people. So
thank you for that.
I hope I've over-answered your question.
I love it.
Anything else? Or I'll move on. Yes?
I'm not sure I'm on. My question is a little bit diffuse, but I was fascinated by the 2 films you presented and the stories around them. My question relates to how the vision of the editor will interact with a film and with the director, and you certainly touched on that a lot in Bless Me Ultima. For me, that film, I haven't seen the film. That book is a seminal part of my life, and that's true of many New Mexicans. So I would have this very strong feeling and vision that I can imagine a director considering totally unacceptable. But if he didn't understand it, my vision might be better than his. So I'd just like to hear a little bit more about that interplay and dynamic and how you see the editor, how seriously they should take themselves and their vision of what the film should be.
Well, many directors take a job because it's a job. It's an interesting subject. And this was an interesting subject. I don't know how you felt about the film as a whole, how close it was to the book. I've never read the book. I probably would have read the book if I had been on the film from the beginning, but having not a lot of time to recut it. The director goes into a film, nobody goes into a film wanting to make a bad movie. Sometimes, in the case of Fosse's movies, you're connected to the project, he's connected to the project, because these are things that interest him. Show business, manipulation of women, kind of the brutality of show business. So he cares. He cares about the subject. other people, like Nick Cassavetes in The Notebook, Nick is kind of a man's director, as it were. He's a big guy. He had made John Q, which was a pretty interesting film that was based in part on his daughter's medical problems, but with Denzel in it. But he had a real connection to that one. The Notebook, Nick had no particular connection with, and in the long run, both of us just tried to make the best possible movie we could. Much to our surprise, it came out as an enormously successful film among a lot of people except film critics. But that's not a really important thing. I mean, when you see a room full of people sobbing and crying and crumpled up tissue paper on the floor, you know you've reached people in some way. So for me, I take a project, I mean, there's some things I really don't want to work on. Super violent movies, big action movies don't really interest me. But for a director, you know, I just hope that he and I will be on the same path, reading a script and trying to make the movie. But basically, the idea of just working the material until you get it so that it touches, reaches the audience, that's the key thing. And I think that's for the director too. I think I asked you at the beginning of this rambling thing, what did you think of Bless Me Ultima compared to the book?
To tell you the truth, I've been afraid to see the movie. It is so meaningful a work to me, and I heard of some of the problems in production, and I just chose not to view it. Now maybe I will, now that I feel there's some hope left for it, based on your work and your presentation.
It's a lovely story. I mean, did I have any real emotional connection to that specific story? No. But as an editor, you're trying to tell a story, and you hope that it's a good one, and you try and make it a good one. So this seemed to work for a large segment of the community once it finally got out there. Yeah, I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, all that jazz was edited, I imagine, on a flatbed and a whole different technology than Bless Me Ultima. And I'd like to, one, ask the transition that you went through from film to digital and your thoughts on that. And Bless Me Ultima is a very painful film for me to watch because I grew up with Bless Me Ultima and Rodolfo Anaya and El Valle and the Puerto de Luna and all that. So you're absolutely right in your assessment of, from the opening, even this narration is it's not New Mexico in many ways.
Yeah.
I had planned to watch the first time the movie in LA at the Kodak Center because I was there for something else, and I went on a Wednesday planning to watch it on a Thursday, and the next day I went and it was gone, and it was sad, you know. And then when I watched the movie, it's hard. Jesus Trevino and several of the Chicano filmmakers in Los Angeles had been trained to make that film since 1975 when they did Gregorio Cortez and all those films. So in many ways, I think that the Chicano filmmakers rejected the film and killed the film, which was kind of sad for Rodolfo Anaya and the book itself.
Okay, now I'm going to have to ask you, the first part of the question has now completely...
Forgot. It's all the jazz editing on I imagine, flatbeds and mag tracks versus the digital transition. And
okay, I got it.
I kind of see a...
Actually, I started before flatbeds. Not truly before flatbeds, but I edited on upright moviolas. And I was very comfortable editing on upright moviolas. I did a few films on a flatbed. Anything I did on 16 millimeter, I had to do on a flatbed because an upright moviola would chew your film to pieces. Physically, it was just hard. Fosse couldn't see the screen on a moviola, which was about this big. And he really couldn't see it, so we did Lenny, and we started working on Lenny on a moviola. And then he asked if he could get a bigger screen, so I switched over and we worked it on a Steenbeck. So, yeah, it was so I'd already gone through the moviola, which is a technology that started in 1922. And the machines still work today, if you could find one. They never broke down. If they did break down, I could fix them with a screwdriver myself. I didn't have to wait for people to show up and repair them. It was, for me, a very comfortable way to work. And then I moved to California in 1994 for various personal reasons and other reasons. But I also decided that I had to learn how to edit electronically, or I would basically be a man without a career, a dinosaur trainer. And I missed the moviola for a little while. And several of the people I met when I first came to California missed film. Now I couldn't dream of going back to it. Nick Cassavetes asked me before we did Alpha Dog, we had done The Notebook, and then he said, "What do you think?" Nick being John Cassavetes' son, and Nick grew up around a cutting room when his father made so many of his movies. And he was familiar with what goes on in a cutting room. He's really very good. But he said, "What do you think? Let's do this film, let's do this movie on film. Moviola, it'll be fun." And I thought for about 30 seconds. And I said, "No, not this film and not with you." And he said, "Why not?" And I said, "You like to make a million changes." Because Nick is a perfectionist and we polish every cut. And I knew that with a bunch of young actors, no real script, it would be a nightmare to try and edit this on film. Steenbeck, moviola, anything. I mean, the last stuff I did on film, I actually worked smaller than a moviola. I worked with a British editing device called an Acmade, which was a synchronizer that had a picture head on it, a motorized synchronizer, and British tables which had bins on them, and you just sort of ran the film. So it was all in an area this big. And I loved it. I loved the intimacy of it, but I couldn't possibly go back to that. I learned at one point when I could barely get out of my editing chair, and this is a good tip for everybody, work standing up. Get one of those tables or put your tables on cinder blocks and work standing up, walk around a little bit, because it's physically really hard to sit. And as you get older, it's harder and harder. When you spend 6-8 hours in a chair, you got to move around. Okay, so anything else, or should I show one more clip? Okay.
Testing.
I'm sorry?
Hello.
Oh, okay, hi.
So I am an editor also. I actually did the Foley, recorded the Foley for Bless Me Ultima. And I kind of started my career like 8 years ago in Los Angeles. I moved out to LA, back to New Mexico to try to make it work. And I've seen a big change in the industry. You know, just from analog to digital one, but then also the budgets keep shrinking, and it seems to be getting harder and harder to make ends meet as a sound editor. Do you have any advice for aspiring sound editors to continue doing, you know, what they love in this changing industry, and where do you see the future going?
Well, on one level, I'm kind of glad that I've got most of my career behind me and don't have to be starting now. I'm being very honest with you. I taught a class at USC a whole semester, and that's the first thing I said to them. Yeah, I both envy you guys because you're going to be watching movies on your telephone and you're going to be making stuff for other media, but nobody knows where it's really going. Now it's exploding, obviously, but basically to make a living, you just have to keep working. And you'll be, you know, as a young editor, you will have opportunities to develop the to develop a money-making way to work in the industry if you really love it, if you really want to stick with it. I once asked Sidney Lumet, when we were doing Network, I had done 2 movies before with Sidney, and they were both pretty bad movies, my first 2 films. I knew the first one, I didn't know the first one was bad because it was my first movie and I was just so excited. But I only knew it was bad when at the premiere everybody was, I could see heads falling asleep. And this is true. So, and the second movie I knew was bad, and I had a lot of discussions with Sidney, not fights, but discussions about how to make it better, and he just didn't like to hear from editors. So when I did Network, which was a superb movie, one day we were going to dailies, and I said, Sidney, how do you pick your films? Now, Sidney worked, when I started working with him, Sidney did 3 films every 2 years. That's an impossible pace to imagine. He came in under schedule, under budget. He delivered the film to the studio, good or bad, ready to be put into theaters and start taking more money in. Anyway, he held up his hand to me like this. And he said, look, you do 5 movies. 1 is going to be terrible. 1 is going to be very good. And the other 3 are going to be average. The important thing, he said, is to keep working. And I agree with him. I mean, if you want to work, we have a lot of people doing reality television in New York, and a lot of in Los Angeles. A lot of them want to do feature films, and I have more fun. I mean, I enjoy feature films. But if, I tell them to just stick with the job, look for openings elsewhere, look for places you might want to be. Just keep working. It's so important to work and so important to...
You in Albuquerque mostly? Or, I mean, do you live here in Albuquerque? What brought you to Albuquerque? Why are you in Los Angeles now?
I'm in Los Angeles now. I've been in Los Angeles for 20 years.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And though I passed through here once on a vacation, I've never been here before today. But I'm not sure why I was asked to come here, but here I am. I'm having a good time. And I think Bless Me Ultima is maybe one of the reasons I was asked to come here, because it's a very New Mexico-centric movie. Well, I hope that answers your question. Okay.
Well, I'm definitely glad you're here. I'm a fan of your work. I'm an editor here in Albuquerque, so pretty young in regards to the field of film. I'm just finishing up my 3rd film, so I appreciate what you said about the 5. The question I had was about, well, a couple questions. First, I want to know what film was dearest to your heart of all the work that you've done. So that's one. The second is more about when I'm doing sound editing, or when you're doing sound editing, and you're going to have a sound editor, officially a sound editor. You're just doing your cut, and you're going to have a Foley artist and all of that. And a lot of that could get stripped. How deep do you go with it? Do you try and get it as close as it would be to the final before actually, passing it along?
Okay. Fair question. When I started working on film, you had a limited number of tracks to work with. Basically 1, your production track. And sometimes if you needed for a screening, you might make a 2nd track. As we started working with electronic editing, you suddenly had 8 tracks, 12 tracks, 20 tracks. That somehow producers and directors got less imaginative. They wanted every possible effect you could put in there. So suddenly a lot of one's time is spent putting sound effects into a movie, which is economically not too sensible. A lot of that work is done by my assistant now when we do it. Music editors, I won't do it anymore. I used to love being a music editor on a film. But when I did that, I knew music libraries. I knew certainly how to edit music and cut it to fit. But I find it's so time-consuming to search out cues. And then you do a couple of cues, you put them in. You might spend a day finding them, another couple of hours putting them in. And then the director comes in and says, I don't like that, find something else, and walks away. It's very Doesn't make sense. So when people want music in a movie, I usually just say, get me a music editor. Because I don't want to do it. And I don't want my assistant really to do it. So that's how I work, at least.
And a lot of times that the music they're getting is just temp anyways at that point.
So I don't hear you too well, I'm sorry.
Oh, at that point, the music is just temporary anyways. They're just going temp tracks.
Yeah, I'm talking about temp tracks. Oh, no. But I don't, again, I don't like, most editors I know really want to spend their time getting the picture right. And, you know, there is a point when imagination has to come into it. The other problem with a temp track is often you fall in love with it. And the composer comes in, and instead of being free to make his own contribution, you have locked him into something that people want to hear. They're familiar with something, which is a trick of music editing. If you want people to like it, stick it in at the beginning when you're auditioning. They can reject it, and then you can slip it in later. And it'll sound familiar, and they'll love it much better. And as for my favorite movies, I guess the stuff I did with Fosse it was always a revelation for me. And we did a lot of discovering in the cutting room. Network was a really easy movie to cut. You can just run whenever you're ready, but Network was a really easy movie for me to cut. I think I delivered my cut on film in 5 days after it was shot, and it was almost never touched. But there was one section that was always it was in contention. And again, I don't know how many of you have seen Network. It's a while ago. It's still an incredibly timely movie. Paddy Chayefsky was a brilliant writer, a polemicist, prescient, talking about politics and oil, and it was just an amazing film to work on from beginning to end. And Sidney Lumet, who's notorious for not shooting a lot of takes, which I love. All the takes were wonderful. Almost everything in the film was great. So I just let the actors go. But there was one scene with a woman named Beatrice Straight, who plays the wife of Bill Holden. And Paddy wanted to take it out. His partner wanted to take it out. Sidney Lumet wanted to take it out. We took one scene out of the movie up to this point. They wanted very much to take it out, and I kept saying, no, let me just transpose these two scenes. Now, we were working on film. If you did it on an Avid, it would take seconds to change it. We did it on film, and Sidney had no patience for this and for changing things. I mean, he liked to have the film look pretty much the way he shot it. The order, the story, everything. So when we got down to this, I just didn't want to take it out, and I kept refusing. I didn't make a thing of it, but I just sort of forgot to take it out. And our producer flew in from the coast, which sounds like a part of a joke. Dan Melnick, who also was a producer of All That Jazz, but Dan flew in from the coast to take a look at it, at the film. And that was on a Friday. Monday morning, I got a call from the producer, Paddy's partner, Howard Gottfried, who said, Alan, and he sort of sang my name, and I know that's trouble. And he said, you know, Danny came up with this great idea. Why don't you transpose those two scenes? And I never do this because I don't care where ideas come from. They're really good ideas, if they're good. This one was particularly good because it was mine. But I did say to Howard, you know, Howard, I've been after you guys to do that for a couple of weeks now. And now you're telling me it's Dan's idea. And that's when Howard said to me, does it matter where a good idea comes from? Well, I took that to heart because it doesn't matter. We show our films to a lot of people.
But he says absolutely nix on going to series. They'll hit us with conspiracy and inducement to commit a crime. Christ, it's cold in here. See, we're paying these nuts from the Ecumenical Liberation Army $10,000 a week in order to turn in authentic film footage of their revolutionary activities, and that constitutes inducement to commit a crime. And Walter says we'll all wind up in federal prison. I said, Walter, let the government sue us. Let the federal government sue us. We'll take them to the Supreme Court. We'll be front page. The month. The New York Times. The Washington Post. The editorials that we give us. We'll be front page for months. We'll have more press than Watergate. All I need is 6 weeks federal litigation. And the Mao Zedong hour can start carrying its own time slot. What's really bugging me now is my daytime programming. NBC's got a lock on daytime. Lousy game shows. And I like to bust them. I'm thinking of doing a homosexual soap opera. The Dykes. The heart-rending saga about a woman hopelessly in love with her husband's mistress. What do you think?
How long has it been going on?
A month. I thought it was a transient thing, blow over in a week. I still pray to God it's just a menopausal infatuation. But it is an infatuation, Louise. There's no sense in my saying I won't see her again, because I will. You want me to leave? Check into a hotel?
Do you love her?
I don't know how I feel. I'm grateful I can feel anything. I know I'm obsessed with her.
Say it. Don't keep telling me that you're obsessed, that you're infatuated. Say that you're in love with her.
I'm in love with her.
Get out! Go anywhere you want. Go to a hotel. Go live with her, but don't come back. Because after 25 years of building a home and raising a family and all the senseless pain that we have inflicted on each other, I'm damned if I'm going to stand here and have you tell me you're in love with somebody else. Because this isn't a convention weekend with your secretary, is it? Or some broad that you picked up after 3 belts of booze. This is your great winter romance, isn't it? Your last roar of passion before you settle into your emeritus years. Is that what's left for me? Is that my share? She gets the winter passion and I get the dotage. What am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to sit home knitting and purling while you slink back like some penitent drunk? I'm your wife, damn it! And if you can't work up a winter passion for me, the least I require is respect and allegiance. I hurt, don't you understand that? I hurt badly. Oh, say something for God's sake.
I've got nothing to say.
I won't give you up easily, Max. I think perhaps it is better if you move out. Does she love you, Max?
I'm not sure she's capable of any real feelings. She's television generation. She learned life from Bugs Bunny. The only reality she knows comes to her from over the TV set. She's very carefully devised a number of scenarios for all of us to play, like movie of the week. Oh, my God, look at us, Louise. Here we are going through the obligatory middle of Act 2, scorned wife throws peccant husband out scene. But don't worry, I'll come back to you in the end. All of her plot outlines have me leaving her and coming back to you because the audience won't buy a rejection of the happy American family. She does have one script in which I kill myself. An adapted for television version of Anna Karenina, where she's Count Vronsky and I'm Anna.
You're in for some dreadful grief, Max.
I know.
There's a 2.5-minute scene, about a 3-minute scene where Bill Holden comes to his wife. She throws him out of the house because he's having an affair with Faye Dunaway. And the scene with Beatrice Straight, his wife, was such a spectacular scene that I just couldn't let go of it. And she got, for a 2.5 or 3-minute scene, which is about all she's in the movie, she got an Academy Award for that scene as Best Supporting Actress. Well deserved. But the way it was before, there was that scene where she throws her husband out of the house, and then there's a scene where he makes, he and Faye Dunaway go off on a dirty weekend, as the British call it, to Long Island, and she only talks about television problems that she's having while they're making love. It's a very funny scene. But coming after this enormous emotional scene, it trivialized the scene that came before it. It cheapened it in some way. You thought, why would this man leave this wonderful woman? They've had children together, they've got a wonderful, just for this crazy lady. But by putting the crazy lady scene first, it took the negative aspects of the love scene out, made it a funny scene, and then you sort of realized why an older man would go with a younger woman with somebody else waiting at home. Anyhow, go watch it. It's a good movie. It's timely. And do I have a hand? Yes.
On behalf of a lot of students we have from up in Santa Fe, one of the things I just wanted you to address from your perspective is it seems to me now, just even listening to you talk, the number of hats that you've worn, you know, you've done more than just editing. You've done a whole lot of stuff. And I guess what I would like to address towards these kids is, isn't it kind of nowadays the best thing to do is instead of specializing is to try and learn as much as you can about everything?
That's always been the case. When I was a sound effects editor and made the transition to being a picture editor, I was sort of in New York, I was a patron saint of sound effects editors because I was able to make that jump. And I've been very lucky. I did it almost effortlessly. I mean, I was asked to do it. I didn't have to really go out and knock on doors. I have found that everything I've ever learned has come into play when I edit a movie. Plays I've seen, music I've listened to, sound effects I've worked on films, tricks you pick up over the years, watching other movies. I always regard watching other movies as not the best thing to do if you want to be in the movie business. You tend to hook onto something and it becomes a trick or almost a cliche. It would be very good, I think, if people just expand your horizons, do as much as you possibly can, because I don't know where the next field is coming from, where the next creative job is coming from. And if you want to create in every aspect that you can in this field and see where it goes. Yeah. Thank you. Did I get through that?